on Politics Today on Channels Television. Well, I told you earlier, it's going to be the National Conference, its outcome, and what it will stand for at the future of this country. Well, I have joining me in the studio a delegate to the National Conference and a member of Afenifere, Yinka Odumakin. Thank you for joining us on the program.
My pleasure.
Also, a legal practitioner and a delegate at the National Conference. He's the president of Aki Kenga, Goodluck Jonathan. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
And Gatima Lima also joins us. He's a policy analyst and a former presidential candidate of the NNPP. Thank you, Gatima, for joining us on the program tonight.
It's a pleasure.
Well, gentlemen, it's going to be a very rounded, squared, and robust discussion, I foresee, looking at the fact that both of you, very close to me, have been at the conference for close to 4 months, and now here we are. Let me start with you, Yinka. For what we have on ground now, looking back at the 17th day of March 2014, how do you think the deliberations went?
Well, I think it was a great moment for this country when the president boldly assembled 492 Nigerians from diverse backgrounds, some of the best this country can get, to look at the future of this country. Well, it was said that, look, there are all kinds of comments when he was out to start. So it was to prevent election from holding. It was a distraction. It was this, it was that. And that, in fact, someone said, okay, how do you want to manage a national conference and an election year? It's not possible and the rest. But I think he took the courage and went ahead to inaugurate that conference. And we went to work. And like he did say in his speech when he was taking the report, that he didn't expect that it was going to be a smooth ride. Because these are issues that have been bottled up for over 100 years. In fact, since 1960, this has been the most profound conference on the issues of Nigeria. This is a conference where every issues have been discussed. And many issues that were not touched by previous conferences have been touched by this conference. And this is a conference where there were threats of walkout and rest, but nobody walked out. We passed over 700 resolutions. We did not have to divide the house for once to pass those resolutions. And I think proper lessons have been taken from this, that anybody that wants anything out of Nigeria must be able to negotiate with other Nigerians. So it's not about my way or the highway. We must get buy-in, because people work with different zones with different agenda. At the end of the day, nobody got exactly what he wanted. So to drop, take, look at the interests of others, and at the end of the day, what we agreed were things that move this country in a different direction.
I remember that your group actually clamored for a conference of ethnic nationality, but that was not what we had. Was that hope dashed? Do you think that the notion that your group had at that time, that you wanted ethnic nationality, do you think the purpose was achieved at the end of the day too?
It was achieved because at this conference, the zones had the 15 representatives based on the geopolitical zones. And I think this changed the tenor of this conference. Unlike the Obasanjo conference, where delegates were based on just mere handpicked by the governors and the federal government, this time around, the nationalities have a core, because 15 delegates per zone, that gives you 90 out of 492. So that was able to shape the discussions along the line in which the building blocks of Nigeria, the things we have tried to suppress over the years, that these things are not there, they came out. And that's why the argument was so robust. That's why tempers flew. But at the end of the day, we came to agreement that this is a new direction in which this country should move. So I think that, by and large, I would say that our expectations for this conference were met 80%.
Interesting. Let me go to Godi now. You, president of Aki Kenga, of course, that's another league of professionals from the Southeastern Bloc. Of course, so from the South-South and South-South. Very interesting. And going into that particular, you had several hats on when you went into that conference. But looking at what we had, setting up the Okunromu committee, the advisory committee, do you think that he had any influence on the way the conference was molded?
I see the panel that worked out on the modalities by which we stood as very key. Without the Okurumu panel, what we'll be discussing, we'll go there and be discussing left to right and right to left. They were the ones who worked out the modalities for the presentation. And it was because it was a very intelligent panel that they had this provision for ethnic southeast zone, northeast zone, northwest, south-south, southwest, and north central. So that from each ethnic group, you always had somebody. The governors, for instance, if you ask the governor of Borno, he will choose 1, 2, 3. Most of them will end up being Kanuri or Biu. But because we also had that group, we had other areas that came to that place on their own merit. The same thing goes for Southwest, South, South, North Central. Because of the quality of the people in that panel, our work was even cut out for us. Because I had a president that said, free hand, discuss freely. That panel was able to make recommendations which we, the delegates, accepted. So much so that even when Okurumu was also a delegate, we were not looking at him. They were looking at the issues they came to that conference with. They came for the centenary deliberation as delegates with bottled up anger, bottled up expectations, and all kinds of views. And because they were able to reach out on their own. I, as president of Aki Kenga, will tell you that the people who were delegates were men and women of quality. I will even call them timber and caliber. And because they were there, they were able to give very, very viable reports.
Interesting. Looking at the Okurumu committee, what it came out, that in fact, when they were going around the country, it raised a lot of dust. You remember there were a lot of disagreements around some places in the country when they were going around. But it doesn't look like we had exactly what the Okurumu committee presented at its report in the national conference.
No, Okurumu committee did not present the report to us. Presented the report to Mr. President.
Of course.
And Mr. President, based on that, released a list. First thing we had to do was work out the modalities for our discussions, the rules of engagement. Yes, you are right, the Okurumu panel had a tumultuous tour of this country, in the sense that you get a place, the Bachama people will rush out and say, we want this. Each ethnic group made a representation to them. Some of them even presented the real issues for discussion. But that was not a job of the panel. The panel was there to discuss the modalities for representation. Now, those issues presented them also were presented to us. Because apart from delegates, those who were not delegates were also asked to present the issues bothering them. And if you see the documents they presented, some of them going back to more than 100 years, documenting various infractions of their rights, talking about the expectations. For instance, state creation. It's not something you keep covered for a long time. If you ask the man in southern Kaduna, he will tell you, look, my expectation of life is not the same thing as from northern Kaduna. And he wanted his own views reflected.